Entertain a motion to do this outside.
No second.
It'll be short. Make it short.
I did want to let the room know that we've started the live streaming on YouTube, so voices can be heard on that. Should have said that 30 seconds earlier.
I thought it was a good idea.
Hi, Mike.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Linda. Okay.
I know.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I was getting
I didn't see you.
I was in the car.
Okay, now, okay.
Pretty good.
Didn't even try.
Pretty good.
Well, I did.
We were at Yeah. That's what I'm supposed to say.
Oh, I am?
You asking them?
It was fun to get that dropped on you. Get started. Howdy. Yeah. Been worse. Oh, sure. Maybe not.
Where did you see those? Yeah. Oh, you see the picture?
I can't myself leave it anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
They said it's ready.
Yeah, it's ready. I got it. They're for sale.
Yeah, but she's been husband we had for the last month. Yeah. Okay, well, I've got 6 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Manson,
Present.
Murdoch. Oh, sorry, wrong person. Maddock, sorry.
Here.
Templin,
Here.
Lane,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Schultz,
Here.
Huggins.
Here.
Here's all present.
Thank you. General business. Entertain a motion to approve the planning commission agenda. Any changes or corrections?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Seeing none, it's approved. Second item is to approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting, and there's 2 meetings there, July 11th and July 25th. Any changes or corrections to note in the minutes?
Chairman, I've got just a comment on, it'd be on the July 25th meeting under 5A. I think it was on the motion. There were 2 motion call-outs. I can't recall who seconded the motion, but there's 2 differences in the call-out. I guess we just need to clear that up.
Yeah, I think I sent out a correction to Brad, but I don't think it made the agenda.
Okay.
Accident, that's my fault.
Okay.
The second motion is the correct motion.
Perfect.
Thank you. Any other changes or corrections to note in the minutes? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of July 11th and the amended July 25th minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Seeing none, those are approved. Item 3C, a disclosure of conflicts of interest. I have a conflict on 5A, so I'll need to recuse myself from that.
Chairman, I have a conflict on 5A and 7C.
I have a conflict on 5A.
Wow. We'll leave you pretty thin on 5A. Any other conflicts to identify? Okay. Seeing none, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. This is for items on the agenda this evening. Anyone addressed with respect to commission business?
Item 5A, I've had communications with Dave and with Kathy and Marietta on the annexation.
That's the rezoning.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. This time, I would call for members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda. Please do so at this time. Any presentations for informational purposes, no action will be taken, and there is a 4-minute time limit. If you'd like to address the planning commission, please feel free to approach the podium. Seeing no one jump out of their chair, I assume we don't have anybody online.
Nobody online tonight.
Okay. I would terminate then the call of the public, which moves us then to item 5A, a public hearing to consider a request to rezone the property at 33475 West 85th Street from R1 to RH. With that, I will recuse myself.
Brad, would you give us an overview, please?
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman. What you have before you is a rezoning at 33475 West 85th Street from R1 residential to RH residential historic. As we all know, we do have a public hearing process that we need to go through. Staff, and prior to the public hearing, is required to submit an advertisement for this item, notify surrounding property owners, and also post a sign on the property, which was all completed. Today, this memo, I did get a call from one representative or one nearby resident asking about protest petition, and I sent them the information for that. They do have to file that with Brandon, depending on the action of the Planning Commission. So at this point, no action has been taken on that protest petition. However, a request has been made. With that, I'll move on to the review of the general zoning requirements. The existing zoning is residential low density, which is typical for single-family residences that are on sanitary sewer and septic, not septic systems. Also south of the property is business general, and then east of the property is residential historic. As you can see on the map, the yellow areas are the R1 districts. The kind of brownish tan is the residential historic, and then the orange area straight to the south is commercial. The uses allowed within the RH district are single-family dwellings and two-family dwellings. Also, nursing care facilities, education, and religious uses can be in there, but with a special use permit. So within the RH district, you can have by right single-family dwellings and duplexes. I've also included an aerial photo of the tract that's being requested to be rezoned. So you can see there are some structures on the site. They are vacant. There's a house there, and the property, to my knowledge, has been vacant for quite some time. This property, if somebody will call, is the old Stump property. There's about 3 acres there, and it's just been a little pocket tract within surrounding area that's developed around it for many years, and this is an infill project along this area. I'd also want to mention that the applicant, Dave Anderson here, is in the audience tonight, so give him a few minutes if he'd like to address the Planning Commission after my presentation. Go through the review of the zoning compatibility factors, the character of the neighborhood. Staff believes a change to RH will not change the character of the neighborhood. As you can see from the zoning map, the east area is already zoned RH. There's not a significant difference between the RH and the R1 areas of this location. Compatibility of the proposed zoning. We believe that the proposed zoning is equally in line with the surrounding zoning and land use. Suitability of the uses to which the property has been restricted under existing zoning. It has not been restricted under its existing zoning and could be developed to some degree in the R1 category. There is a sale of the property that's pending on the zoning to be moved to the RH designation. The reason the applicant wants to have the RH designation is the opportunity for duplexes, but also there is slight reduction in the setback requirements for the RH. So you can have a side yard setback of 7 feet versus 15 feet, or pardon me, 10 feet on the R1 designation. There's also some height restrictions if they decide to go that route. But it's a little more generous with the RH. Right? So it allows some more flexibility to develop the tract. Length of time the property has been remained as vacant as zoned. It's only been, I'd say, in the last several years, not that I've kept close track of it, that has been vacant, but the single-family residence on site is unoccupied and has been so for several years. The extent to which there's a need in the community for this use, there is no particular need for additional RH housing. However, as we've seen it many times in the old part of DeSoto, we've had a lot of infill projects, and it is a little more suitable and easier for the developer to, maneuver with setbacks and some of the other requirements with the RH zoning. So that's why the old street shop was rezoned to RH, and so that's an example of why the RH zoning has been requested. Availability of required utilities and services for this tract and under the proposed zoning, don't see any additional impact to municipal services caused by this rezoning. The layouts that I have seen for this do show a single cul-de-sac coming in to the site, and so there will be no efforts by the city themselves to have to do anything in particular to our street system. There's sanitary sewer and electric, water, all available on this site already. And as I mentioned, this is an infill project, which we do encourage. Extent of the uses which the proposed zoning would adversely affect the capacity or safety of that portion of the street network. All parking will be required to be on each individual tract. There'll be no additional impact of the street network caused by this rezoning, as I previously had stated. Environmental impacts, don't see that there'll be any significant increase or reduction in any kind of environmental harm for this area. Economic impact on the community, do think it'll be beneficial for the city of DeSoto as a whole. As I mentioned, it's an infill project, so there will be some increase in property taxes, and also additional residents will contribute to sales tax revenues. The extent which the zoning amendment may detrimentally affect nearby property, I talked about that earlier. When you look at the aerial photo, there isn't any real significant difference in the RH area, which you can see is on the map or on the aerial photo, and just the areas to the west of there, which are zoned R1. Very similar in nature, and don't see any positive or negative results on property values. And then public health, safety, and welfare from a denial of this rezoning. Don't see that there would be any effect on the adjacent neighborhoods, and don't see that the general public or residents in the area would benefit in any way from a denial of change in the application. Did look at the future land use plan. It is consistent with with the potential zoning, our land use doesn't get into the zoning districts per se. It does show residential areas, and this area is shown as residential in the future. Then finally, recommendation of professional staff. We do believe that the rezoning is consistent with the future land use plan, and there are no significant or any negatives associated with this rezoning. So with that, I will stand for any questions and reemphasize that the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, makes the final decision. But we do have to open a public hearing, allow for public comment before the Planning Commission should move forward with any kind of decision. So with that, I will stand for any questions that you may have.
Brad, I was just curious, so the main difference between R1 and RH is just the setback? That's really the only reason for the change, is just a little bit more leniency?
Correct, yes.
And it's,
Well, then you also have the opportunity for duplexes in RH as well.
That would be the difference between R2 and RH.
okay, that was gonna be my next
Yeah.
question. Okay.
If it stayed R1 on that 2.7 acres, how many single-family homes could be built on it versus duplexes?
Well, I guess I might have to ask the applicant that. I know that it would reduce it by a certain amount of number. I mean, I think, Dave, there's about 10 or 11 lots that you're trying to get in there. It probably would cut it back to 6 or 7, but that's, I didn't see, I've not seen it. It's been a few years since I've seen a layout of this, but it would make a difference in the amount of tracks that could be back there. And then, of course, the cost to bring in the cul-de-sac and extend utilities would be the same, so you're dividing less units potentially onto a fixed cost.
Anyone else have any questions? Dave, would you like to come up? Do you have anything you want to say?
Name and address?
Yes, please.
David Anderson, 9152 Shorewood Drive, and I own this property and intend, as Brad mentioned, to develop it into 10 duplex lots. There were layouts as much as 13, but that doesn't make a lot of sense up there, and 10 is about all we can do. The RH was created to encourage infill development. I completed an infill development project right behind Great American Bank. The 3 duplexes that are there were combined, the lots were divided, and I think you can see the product. I'm pretty proud of it, and this will be that or more. So I know it's a change to the community, but wanted to look at the RH because it was compatible near versus the R2, which would allow the same thing, only it didn't seem to make much sense. So that's why I asked for RH. And if there's any questions, I stand to answer them whenever,
Okay.
if you have any.
Does anyone have
Or
questions?
later.
All right, Dave.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner, can I ask that you open the public hearing?
Yes, I was going to do that next.
Just want to make sure.
All right, thank you. We'll open the public hearing now. If anyone would like to come up and to the podium and give your name and address, we'd be happy to hear from you.
And this is for questions we have on this proposal?
Yes.
Okay. I am Marietta Bickelmeyer. My address is 33445 West 85th Street. And how long is the process? One of the first questions, how long before I know if the zoning was changed? And how do I know that? Is there a way of knowing that?
It'll go before the city council.
Okay.
Once it's, once we make a decision tonight, then it'll go before the city council, I believe, in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then they'll make a decision at that time.
And how would I find out what the decision was made?
You're welcome to come to the meeting, or the minutes are always posted online.
Okay, Okay, so there will be another meeting about this
With the city council,
with the
yes.
city council? Okay, next question is, like a blueprint layout of the, when will that be presented? What it looks like?
That, Mike?
Yeah, that'll be a subsequent application. The applicant will have to submit a preliminary plat for the lots and the street and the lot layout.
Okay.
That'll come later.
That'll come later, okay.
Yeah, so we're not in control of that. I assume that he'll want to proceed with that possibly
Okay, I
next
was
month.
just curious how long a process this is gonna take. I've never been involved in anything
so,
like this.
Yeah, start to finish, usually something like this, if all the approvals go as planned, it's 3 to 6 months in the planning process.
Okay, is one of the things that the rezoning takes into consideration is the traffic flow of this area, 85th Street? Because I'm sorry, Linda, I didn't mean to.
That's okay. I don't suppose we'd have a traffic study done on this, would we?
The only reason I'm asking is because especially school children, when high school gets out, they love to use that street. Because it's like the first kids down Lexington start texting all the rest of them, and if there's cops sitting on Lexington, they all fled down 85th Street. Well, if this rezones and all these are put in there, that's more traffic because a lot of the kids, and I have talked to the police department about this, and their response was, I accepted it because they're limited in how many people. But when I finally did see them on my street, they sat out in the street. And I thought, that's not really, hiding to catch the kids. But it hasn't stopped it. And that's why I'm wondering if, with the excess apartments and stuff, or duplexes, you're causing more traffic along there too. So I just didn't know if that's being taken into consideration.
I'm sure that they consider that.
Well, there's discretion about whether or not to require a traffic study on
Okay.
every planning application. Typically, that doesn't occur at the zoning, at time of rezoning, because the specifics aren't known. Like in this case, we don't know how many units, what the
Yeah.
impact might be. But I don't want to give the impression that there is discretion from the part of the planning commission as to whether they think it warrants a traffic study
Okay.
or analysis.
Well, is there any consideration of stop signs, like a three-way stop along that area?
Yeah, again, that would be probably part of the traffic impact
Okay.
analysis
Okay.
that's done when the site plan, when the preliminary plat comes.
Okay, okay. Well, I think that's it for now.
All right.
I think
Thank
that's all I
you.
got.
Thanks for coming up. Anyone else?
My name is A.C. Hallmark, and I live at 33525 West 85th. I'm not up on R1, RH, or any of that stuff, but I've lived in that house for 40 years. And I've, 9 new duplexes and that 2 acres over there. It's gonna make that, it's too much. It's gonna make too many people, and it's a mess right now. It's gonna get even worse. And I'd just like to say I'm all for development. Put a few homes in there, that's fine, but to load it down with 9 duplexes, that's 18 families. And every family's got at least 1 car, and you won't find too many families that don't have 2 cars. And that's all congested right in there around my house, where I have a hard time getting out of my driveway. And I have a trailer, an RV that I've had for 10 years. I've been able to get in and out, no problem. It's getting there where I can't even do that anymore. And with these 9 new duplexes moving in there, I'll never get out. I'll have to go pay $100 a month somewhere to store it. And that's basically, I don't mind the houses going in. I just think it's too many.
Thank you for coming up. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Any other comments?
The only thing I was thinking of, yeah, everything around it is to the east is already zoned RH, where this is zoned R1 for single family. But due to the size of the lot, it's kind of a unique situation as to what impact it will have on the neighborhood. You know, with, they've already mentioned the traffic, and I've been through there when there's been a lot of the kids coming through, and it's about like 83rd Street down in front of my house. They, you know, they're either talking on their phone or texting on their phone while they're trying to drive and stuff. And it's not just kids, unfortunately, it's adults too, but I don't know if it would warrant a traffic study and possibly three-way stop signs there. I don't know. To me, it kind of seems like it would make an island of multifamily when you've got single family basically everywhere around except for the one apartment building there on Ottawa Street. And I know we need the housing and stuff, but with all the projects that we've got going, I don't really want to become the town known as apartments and duplexes. You know, we still need single family homes, even though starter home is pretty much a thing of the past now due to labor costs and material costs.
So Mike, is that something that we could request, that a traffic study be done prior to?
Well, certainly, yeah, planning commission has the discretion to require that at the time of preliminary plat. And, you know, the traffic impact is one of the factors that you are to consider with the rezoning. And I think in this case, it's very uncommon for a traffic impact study to be presented with a rezoning application. Typically, I don't think I've ever seen one, just because you don't have a specific layout involved. But it is at the next step within your discretion to require that to be looked at. Yeah.
So that would not be something we would initiate today.
It could be a factor in your determination whether you want to rezone.
Okay.
I don't think you can't. What you can't do is, and what the council cannot do, the way our codes are set up, is conditionally approve a rezoning.
Okay.
So you can't say, okay, we approve the rezoning, but as long as the traffic study shows everything's okay. It's kind of an all or nothing at this point. Obviously, traffic impact is one of the factors to consider.
Certainly.
I guess I also would add, this is a land use question. I mean, it's always really easy to want to jump into the final layout and design and all the particulars, but right now we're just looking as, can we do duplexes and, well, the applicants has suggested doing duplexes. Is that an appropriate land use for this area? Considering that when you look at the zoning map, and there's a lot of RH all around it. It's just on the west side is R1, and it is, and the current tract is R1. But as you recall, when Joe Roy was in doing Possum Creek, and we had a lot of these same sort of discussions, he used that uptown overlay district to also squeeze his setbacks a little bit as well. So there is going to be some density issues associated with this that are part of, that's what that they fit. I'm like, once again, I've seen these layouts. The developer can't get these to work and fit with all the requirements we have within the city code. And so that's kind of why our recommendation has been to go ahead and approve this, because we like infill projects. The density is not extravagant, but yeah, there are some concerns, obviously. And actually, that would be now a four-way intersection because Kickapoo would get extended down in a cul-de-sac. So that's something we could, talk to the applicant about, requiring a traffic study and having a four-way stop signs there, or maybe they just need two on Kickapoo Street and then Kickapoo the cul-de-sac. So those are discussions we'll have, obviously, as we move forward in the process.
I did get a little bit get the cart ahead of the horse a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's easy to do,
It's a rezoning and not a site plan.
All right. Thank you, Brad, for that clarification. All right. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I don't, if we're just looking at it strictly from a is this an appropriate use of land? I don't see any reason to say no. I think I would probably feel the same way as you guys do if I was across from it, but in terms of what the city's got laid out here, I don't see any reason why it's not an appropriate use of the land. So I would make a motion to approve the item 5A on the agenda for rezoning from R1 to RH.
Brandon, do you want to do roll call?
Yep. Minnock,
Yes?
Lane,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Huggins. Motion carries.
All right,
I don't
thank
think
you.
I missed anybody. There's not a lot of people up there.
That's it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll go get the other three.
All right. Okay, we'll wait for the rest of our people to rejoin us.
As I might add, if you're only here for the rezoning, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting if you don't want to. So feel free to,
But you're more than welcome to.
yeah, you're more than welcome to, but we do have a few more items on the agenda, so it'll be a little bit.
We got a fist fight?
Not enough people.
Okay. So seeing how we have no old business in item 6, I think we're on item 7A.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you in item 7A is the carriage houses. I've submitted a site plan for one additional building at Building K at Gardner Road and 83rd Street. The location east is a previously approved PUD, and this building itself is now in a commercial C2 zoning district. Because of it, the district different zoning, a site plan is required. So that is what is before Planning Commission on this item. The application materials are in Exhibit A. The site plan and site development plan with building elevations are included in Exhibit B. There are several exhibits attached, including the stormwater memo, which actually was prepared for this whole site, that said that there is not additional detention or any detention required because it drains right into Cedar Creek and would be ahead of any kind of surge of stormwater that might be coming down Cedar Creek. Additionally, on this tract, because it does front 83rd Street, we did have some discussions with the applicant about landscaping along 83rd Street. They did point out that there is some native trees and things that are along 83rd Street, which do count towards the buffering requirement that this development would have. We also talked to them that there's some areas that could be enhanced, and they agreed to plant some additional trees, put in a rock retaining wall, and then also plant some flowers in front of that. So it'd be very consistent with what the entry is on the other side of the road. So that is included in your landscape memo. Also, the architectural memo does outline some of the site features that they plan to have on this building as well. So we went through the technical review and feel like it's very consistent with what is out there. There'll be no material change, and they will be adding some additional trees and stonework along 83rd Street to meet the requirement for frontage along an arterial road. Also, we did talk about the dedication of 20 additional feet of right-of-way, which is on the final plat to be considered later in this agenda. So with that, I will stand for any questions you have, but it's staff's recommendation to approve the site plan for carriage houses, Building K. One thing I also wanted to mention is there will be a couple of units that will have restrooms in this. So there is a area of open space that you can see on the drawing that shows a septic or a lateral septic tank and lateral field. Those will only be, and there'll be a public restroom, and then there'll be one of the units will have a potential for a restroom inside the unit, which is the only one that would be out there. All the others are, there's a common restroom facility. So there'll be one common restroom added in Building K, and then one private potential restroom in one of the units around that location within the building structure itself. So with that, I will stand for any questions that you may have.
Hey, Brad, that unplatted area, is that for future phasing?
Yes, well, we've had some discussions with the applicant about that. They want to put in a sort of a longer, skinnier building, but Joe and I've talked, it does affect the streamway buffer corridor, and don't know if that's going to fit. So we've asked them to do some, I guess, Joe, if you want to explain that better, a no-rise study for that area to see if it'll impact that location. But so right now they want to just proceed with Building K and get that started.
Okay. And then the last question, they did say they didn't submit any architectural elevations. Are they gonna submit those? I know they said they're gonna match what's out there, but is staff gonna review that before the permits release?
Yeah, that, well, I guess, and because they've gone through this process so many times, we know pretty much what they're doing. They did submit that architectural memo, but that'll be something that Cameron, when he reviews the building, for the building permit, will coordinate and make sure that it meets requirements of the site plan and that it is consistent with what's currently out there.
Perfect, thanks.
You mentioned the no rise certificate. Is one required for this building?
Joe, I guess not for this building, but if you want to summarize some of the things we've talked to them about, that'd be great.
Yeah, for this application, this building is outside the floodplain. They had brought in an earlier site plan where there was a building at east of Building K that's in the floodplain, and we asked before they proceed with that, they need to do or complete the no-rise LOMAR to be able to show that the proposed grading they needed to do to get it out would not have an impact on the floodplain. So until that gets done, they haven't come back in for that site, but this building is outside the limits of the floodplain in that location.
And I guess the two buildings to the north, are they part of the approved development plan?
Yeah, G and those, yes, those two have already been approved. We might have some issues with the length of building G as far as what Joe's talking about with that no rise, so. And we've discussed that with the applicant as well. So.
Okay.
That's they're supposed to come back with a no-rise that shows how all the buildings could be taken out of the floodplain. Otherwise, those that are constructed or in will still be required to cover flood insurance.
Okay. On the report, item C, it says no public utility improvements on the site. I guess that means that that doesn't mean they're not there. That just means there won't need to be public improvements done for this.
That's correct. That's correct. We're not maintaining them. There's still going to be some drainage pipes and things like that of that nature, but they're not publicly maintained. That's probably what.
Yeah, we don't have any public sanitary water
Okay.
or storm sewers.
And on the stormwater memo, there's 3 pages. I'm a little confused by the 3rd page.
Yeah, when they submitted that, there was a back page that should have been there,
So that's just to be disregarded.
yes.
Now, we're in agreement with the stormwater study with being its location. Detention doesn't really do anything. And you want to get the runoff from the site
I agree.
before the peak shows up.
What is it, 1455500 Parallel Road, Baser, Kansas? Your pictures show that on the address, as do the other pictures.
I think that's just
That's the consultant's address?
Yeah, that's on their logo.
Okay, That's not the address of this property.
Right, yeah, I had that same question. That's the consultant's address.
So they just, when they printed it, they just had their footer on all those?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that post offices do fight over addresses, but that would be a stretch. So, does the presence of a bathroom in one of the units make it a potential dwelling unit?
I mean, that's certainly been a concern, and maybe Mike can address this since that was part of the process when this whole development became into play. But as far as the review, as what gets built in there, will go through the building official, which will show that there's no residential type structures. Now, could somebody sneak something in there? Possibly, yes, but it's our contention at this point because of the zoning is C2. They do have the opportunity and the right to put in a septic system as long as it conforms to environmental practices. So I felt like in this instance, allowing one potential location would be probably not egregious.
And what do they use for water there?
That is City of DeSoto water.
So we have a city water line that services that?
Yeah, it goes up, all right, it goes along 83rd Street.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Brad. So this is not a public hearing item. The matters before the planning commission to discuss the site plan.
I think I've reviewed it, and I think it's in general conformance with what's out there. Looks like they kind of know what they're doing out there, so it's not the first one.
Done a couple of these before, so I think pretty much in line with everything else.
They would like to propose a motion?
Make a motion where you approve the site plan for Carriage House Building K as submitted.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote?
Manson,
Yes.
Milborn,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Huggins, sorry,
Yes.
Lane. Yes. Motion carries.
Item 7B, consider the final plat for Carriage Houses Phase 13.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to the next step, this is the final plat for this tract, which does include the lateral field and septic tank area. As you know, before building permits can be issued, final plat needs to be approved by the planning commission and easements and rights of way accepted by the city council. So they are moving on with that process tonight and have submitted the final plat for Carriage Houses 13, Tract M, which does include just the meets and bounds of that building that is part of the site plan. As you know, the next step will be once the exterior structures and interior walls are completed, there'll be a replat that comes back before the planning commission, so each individual item can be sold. Have reviewed the final plat and feel like and approve the content in it, that it is acceptable and meets the City of DeSoto issues or requirements for platting, and recommending to the planning commission to approve the final plat for Carriage Houses number 13, Tract M.
Any questions for Brad?
I think the only thing, there's a couple signatures, I think that just need to be updated.
Yeah, they're, we always, as we've changed staff or changed representatives on planning commission and city council, that occasionally these have to be resubmitted and get the correct individuals involved, but when this was submitted, it didn't catch that, so
I would assume approval with what we have is sufficient.
I believe so,
Making that
yes.
swap, we don't have to.
Yeah,
Table it till we get
I've done it many times, maybe I have administratively, I've just said, hey, this is incorrect, you know, please get a good signature on her.
Doesn't seem material to me. Any other questions for Brad? Again, it's not a public hearing item, so the matter is before the planning commission. Any comment? Discussion? Hearing crickets. Anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion, we approve the final plat for Carriage Houses number 13 and send the plat for acceptance of easements and right-of-ways to city council.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Huggins.
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Milburn.
Yes.
Templin.
Yes.
Maddox.
Yes.
Manson.
Yes.
Oh, Lane, excuse me, sorry, different page, Lane. You're on the next page when I
Oh,
scrolled
that's
down. Apologize about that. There we go.
Next item of business, consider item 7C, consider the final plat for the residences at Eagle Creek. Commissioner Milburn is recusing himself.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have is the final plat for Eagle Creek. Previously, the Planning Commission did approve the preliminary plat for Eagle Creek, and now before, once again, they can get started with the project, the final plat does need to be submitted to the Planning Commission and to the City Council for acceptance of easements and rights of way. Staff has reviewed the final plat and find that it is in conformity with the preliminary plat. We did, as you recall, have some discussion on additional easements at the end of the cul-de-sac and then further down between, I think, lots 14 and 15 to address some sewer connections. Maybe it's not 14 and 15. There should be a easement. Oh, pardon me. It's between 24 and 25 and then 19 and 20. As far as the benefit district, to allow for extension of sewer lines to those adjoining residents, and those have been included on this document. Staff does find that it's in conformance with the preliminary plat, and it does meet the requirements for a final plat in the city of DeSoto, and recommend the Planning Commission to approve the final plat for Eagle Creek and recommend the City Council acceptance of easements and rights of way.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions?
Since Justin's not here, I have to ask the same question. I assume we'll update the signatures.
Yeah, yes, I believe former Chair Garrett is still on the final plat, so.
You can get Bob to sign them. I'm okay with that. So my recollection of this when we did the preliminary was that the neighbors to the east had some concerns about connecting sewers, and those have all been addressed, you think, from this?
And Joe was gonna hook them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the applicant's gonna extend those sewer lines up there, and it's obviously up to the adjoining property owners to take it from their residence to the tie-in location. But that is part of the benefit district that was established, that those extensions would occur.
And the benefit district has already been established.
It's established and been paid for, as I recall.
Yeah, it's been paid off for
That's the
10
one that
years.
was this historic one, okay. So we don't think there's any concerns that we need to address on any of that,
No, I don't believe so.
okay?
And of course, tracks A, B, and C are a drainage easement that will be a permanent, actually in a nice buffer between the duplex development and the single-family residences to the west.
Well, I believe this is not a public hearing item, but is there anyone here who's concerned with this, that wishes to be heard? You guys are all here for something else, okay. Thank you, Brad. Any other comments, questions? Perhaps a motion?
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the final plat for Eagle Creek as presented.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Maddox.
Yes.
Templin.
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Huggins.
Yes.
Manson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is item 7D, or sorry, C, sorry, D. Consider the site plan for Evergy Pacific Substation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As part of moving on with the Panasonic development, there was discussion for an additional substation for that location, or for the Panasonic building itself. The Pacific Substation is the name of this spot, and did look to make sure power transmission distribution is allowed in the M1 zoning district. When we approved the Panasonic building and site plan and layout, this tract was identified on the layout, but it was not part of the Panasonic site plan approval process. So therefore, when Evergy came forward to wanting to get a building permit, we had to back up and say, oh, the Planning Commission needs to approve a site plan prior to proceeding with the substation itself. So therefore, we've gone through the process. Application materials have been submitted. The site plan meeting with staff has been completed. There are some renderings and some elevations that are included in Exhibit B. The applicant also has several representatives tonight, and they do have a PowerPoint presentation that they'd like to present to the Planning Commission as well. I will go through the staff report. Once again, it proposes electrical substation with precast concrete walls to the north, east, and west sides, and chain link on the south side. Details of the fence are included in the site plan. Landscaping element, essentially trees and those types of buffering, are not included due to the decorative precast concrete fencing and heavily wooded areas to the south of the leased area. I think one thing that's also important to know is that Evergy doesn't own this tract. It's part of the Panasonic site. This is what they were given to use, and they, from my understanding, is they weren't given one additional foot more than they needed. So there was we did have some discussions on how to try to find some additional locations for some buffering, some trees, things like that. But we also talked about that the site is very low, and it won't be visible from, or not particularly visible, being behind the Panasonic building, also being not directly adjacent to Lexington as it curves and heads to the west to 103rd Street. And so it felt like the landscaping area could be put on hold, and that's why there's a condition in the staff report, is if road network changes and there is some additional potential frontage along this site, that there'll be additional landscape items built into that plan. Now, of course, they could be on city right-of-way, so that might be on us to put those trees in there, but we certainly want to have recognition that there still could be some potential public areas that would need to be buffered by this potential substation. One thing also, if you took the time, there is a substation out on K10 and Sunflower Road, very similar in nature to what this will be. There won't be any kind of laydown yards that are out along that location, but they did include some, and that was in unincorporated Johnson County, so that went through the Johnson County planning, and they did have some landscape trees, some things like that. But Evergy owns that piece of property, so they had made provisions for those setbacks and requirements for landscaping. In this location, they don't have, because they're not the owner of the tract, they don't have the opportunity to put those in. The photometric plan is not needed because there won't be any lighting on the site. It's just for routine maintenance and or emergency repairs. Didn't feel like there's a need for additional stormwater because the site will have minimal impervious area. The access to the site will be on a private road for Evergy employees only, and there won't be any permanent employees at this location. As far as architectural standards, did have a little bit of a challenge thinking about how to apply those. Since there are no buildings on site, we can't use our typical standards. There'll be just transmission lines, poles, and distribution equipment itself. The equipment is approximately 30 to 40 feet in height. The transmission lines and poles could be up to about 85 feet, which is similar to the height of the Panasonic building itself. And once again, the area is low. It's behind the Panasonic location. It's off a fair distance from 103rd Street or Lexington Road, wherever you want to say that transition occurs. So we don't feel that the architectural standards within our city code are particularly applicable. No signage has been requested. And then, of course, easements and lot lines, the site is leased to Evergy, so this is part of Panasonic's property. So there are no lot lines part of this proposed site plan. So with that, staff is recommending approval with one condition. Should that area become more visible due to public roads or development, additional landscaping buffering will be included. Also, the applicant would like to address the planning commission with a PowerPoint presentation. So if it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, I can turn the floor over to them, or I can proceed with any questions and comments you may have.
Any questions for Brad first?
Brad, do we know who will be served by this substation?
Well, it's designed for Panasonic itself, but also any ancillary uses in that area. There is another Atlantic substation that will be proposed, which is farther to the south, which will help with the entire build out of the site, but this one is primarily for Panasonic and any kind of nearby developments.
Any other questions for Brad at this moment? Sure, we can certainly hear from the applicant.
Okay.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi. Jessica Keck with Evergy, 818 South Kansas Avenue, Topeka, Kansas. Thank you. I was going to say, who's going to do my slideshow?
Yeah.
Just do a little short presentation. I'll try not to bore you, but we can go to the next one. So as Brad mentioned, we're on an easement, about 16-acre easement from Panasonic to build our substation. The substation itself is about 9 acres. The rest of that area is drainage and transmission line easements. So the site is pretty much covered by transmission line easements outside of our substation boundary. So the substation is going to serve the demands of Panasonic, and then grading did begin around June of 2023. Construction of the substation is anticipated to begin this fall, with it to be in service early of 2025. Just an overview of the site plan. There's our substation, Panasonic properties over to the west. The actual fence line is the bold on the 3 sides, north, east, and west, and the south side is going to be that tightly woven mesh fencing. And then you'll see the grading on the side of it. And then the blue depicted in there, that light blue, is where our transmission line easements are. So the landscaping and fence highlights, the precast concrete walls, like we'd mentioned, on the northeast and west sides, 9-foot precast wall. It's a solid wall, and then we'll have a foot of barbed wire on the top for security reasons. And then on the south side is a standard tightly woven mesh, 7-foot tall fence, plus the foot of barbed wire on that as well. There is significant stream buffer that's being left on the south side of the property, which is why we decided to leave the mesh fence on that side as well. Native grasses will be planted on the north and east side of the substation, and then the remainder of the easement will be planted with an appropriate grass seed mix. So we're going to reseed everything that is disturbed. We'll have some rocks or riprap where the drainage comes out, but that's about it, and then everything else is going to be grassed. And then the trees along, like I'd mentioned, the trees along the south side are going to remain as well. No additional landscaping is planned at this time, and the main reason for that is not because we're being hard-headed, but that transmission line easement, we don't put trees in transmission line easements, even if they're short trees. I mean, it's not going to be any taller than the wall. So it's not good for transmission lines, so we just don't do it. Next, please. And this is a picture of the standard wall. The gate's going to be a little different. The gate down below is actually what it is. We didn't have a picture of that, but that's the standard wall. And that's going to be, like I said, the north, east, and west sides. And then the next one will just be a picture of that tightly woven mesh. It's more of a security fencing than what the typical chain link fencing is. And I believe that is the end of the presentation. And we'll take any questions you guys might have.
So I noticed in the letter that was provided to Brad, under the site plan and building design, this July 28th letter, it states that the proposed specific substation down at the site and building proposed specific substation will be located on land owned by Panasonic and will eventually be incorporated into the landowner's overall site development strategy. So, I'm not sure what that means.
I didn't write that line. I'll be honest with you. I didn't write that line. It's an easement. It's an easement that the Panasonic has given to us, and we're going to maintain it. We're going to maintain the substation. We're going to maintain the transmission lines throughout of it. It's our responsibility to maintain that site. But it is an easement. We don't own the property, and I don't believe we ever will. Correct? Yeah.
Well, I get all that. That said, I think Brad's initial comment on that was a good one, that we need to have something that says that in the event this becomes unsightly, that we have to have some sort of a landscape buffer or something to deal with that. It won't be on a property that you control.
Correct.
I get that.
Right.
So I just wondered if there had been any discussions with Panasonic about how this is going to fit into their overall strategy. Are they planning on doing anything else around it to give you better screening? No discussions like that, I'm assuming, have taken place.
Kale, do you know? Have we?
So realistically,
You have to get up and come here.
I'm sorry.
you guys need my address.
We've got,
It's the same address as mine.
that's fine, just certainly a name for the record would be helpful.
Yeah, Kale Lovelace with Evergy.
I'm sorry, could you do that again for the microphone?
Kale Lovelace with Evergy.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Panasonic is still kind of to be determined on their final plan for the northeast corner directly north of our substation. And I believe there's an area northwest of our sub as well that they're still kind of finalizing how they're going to use that ultimately. I'm pretty certain it's going to be developed with warehouses and such, but unsure yet. I think that the way this should probably go, for starters, we sit about 15 feet below the existing north elevation, about 50 feet below the roadway. We don't know how the site grading is going to change in the future. Panasonic couldn't really commit to making any plans for vegetation around our sub. It's kind of where we stand right now.
But you have had some discussions that if that is required in the future, then obviously you guys won't be able to do it.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah. They're aware that we can't really establish vegetation until
And we can't do it within our
at all. Yeah.
So I guess it comes down to Panasonic will pay for it or Evergy will pay for it?
If we do if we end up coming back with landscaping outside of our, it would have to be outside of our easement.
Right.
So it would.
I'm guessing it's not Evergy.
It would not be.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess it's Panasonic aware of that.
So,
I think I'll clarify with Panasonic that if there's to be any vegetation added to protect our substation, that they will be footing the bill.
Okay.
There's just a lot of unknowns about everything that's going around the sub right now. So.
well, and I think Commissioner Milburn's point's a good one, because if we approve this with some sort of a stipulation that the owner of the property is going to be the one responsible for this, not necessarily you.
Yeah.
I think we probably need to make that clear.
Yeah.
I have one other question about this. So you're 15 feet, you said, below essentially the grade at that point?
Yeah. Prior grade before excavation. Yeah.
But according to Brad's report, the approximate height of equipment is 30 to 40 feet
Inside the substation.
inside the
correct.
substation.
Right.
So you still have quite a bit that's going to stick out.
Yeah, but if you get the drop from Lexington Avenue, it's about 40 to 50 feet. And then you have kind of a berm there as well. It's about 7 foot from the road. And you have
Okay.
the hump, and then you go down about, I think about 40 feet. Probably 50 once the site's all graded out.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know
so
it's kind of a moving target.
It is, and it's kind of hidden back in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
For Brad, isn't that a rail spur that runs right through the middle of that too?
That's been demolished.
Not anymore.
Oh.
I thought I forgot something.
Apparently I didn't need to answer that question.
Well,
Sorry, Brad.
The only reason why I brought it up is because last commission meeting, we had a piece of land that was being moved into a park, and we took into consideration the rail spur that is directly connected to where this would have existed, I guess is kind of what my question was.
I think I saw on your display that there are signs posted all the way around, emergency.
Yeah, around our substation?
Yeah.
Correct, yes. All of our fences and gates have signs about it being high voltage and stay out.
Well, I know my husband used to, when he was a kid, used to like to go up there and go on that property. I'm sure there's still kids that go up there and
Yeah.
tromp around, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
that
and the
know.
gates are very secure. Like I said, it's 9 foot, and then you have the barbed wire on top, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
So the blue on your site plan is easement?
Transmission, it's within the easement, but you can see it also goes around the other side of the property. It's transmission line easement, so it's where we're gonna put our transmission line poles.
So the one that goes to the south, what, is that tying into an existing line down there somewhere, or do you have specific?
We'll be back for that
Is that
substation.
kind of a salmon?
So there's another proposed substation that's gonna come before you guys probably in a couple months, down on that part of the property, and then it'll
Like
tie into it.
115th Street, because I think we've talked about this before.
119th.
119th.
Yeah. And that'll tie into some transmission lines south of there as well.
Okay, it'll extend 143rd Street or all the way down? I mean, where's it gotta go to catch a transmission?
Down to the 345 line
Yeah.
that runs south of the Sunflower property.
Yeah.
That's 143rd.
Is that important?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything additional?
Any other questions? Thanks for the presentation. It's
Thank
always
you.
nice to have pictures.
Thank you.
So Brad, if I could bother you again just for a second. As far as those rail lines go, and we talked about preserving that for potential rail access on those northern tracks, would putting this at this location, I'm guessing those rail lines are gonna go east of that if they do extend down?
Well, I've not seen any kind of layouts where their future rail lines may go. Now, if you look at old pictures of Sunflower, there was a significant system of rail tracks. So eliminating this one isn't going to potentially eliminate any kind of rail accessibility, at least using the old rail lines themselves. And I don't know, Mike, if they've even got to the point where they're going to use rail. They're kind of keeping that option open. But as of right now, obviously, you can't get a railroad or a rail car across Commerce Drive. But so at this point, whatever line that went through that location has been agreed to by Astra Development as part of selling this property to
I guess they're the
Sunflower.
ones that are probably most interested in that, right?
Yes, Astra would be.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, there it is. This is under, item 7 from, and it's track B. It looks like a former rail spur on the site.
But that's actually farther to the north and east a little bit from here. So it's still quite a ways off from this location, probably a half mile maybe.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Can I clarify one thing?
Sure.
I said,
Thank you.
I made a mistake. I looked at the wrong picture. I said the 9-foot precast had barbed wire on the top. It does not. It's 9-foot precast. The barbed wire is on the other fence. So just clarified. I don't want you guys to think I was lying about something. I just looked at the wrong picture.
Well, we're gonna miss the barbed wire on top of that fence.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Brad or the applicant? Okay, this is not a public hearing item, so the matter is before the planning commission. Any comments, discussion?
It's just an interesting scenario that it's on a leased piece of property with no bounds to do anything to protect it.
So, on that point, I have a modification of the proposed condition on page 3 of the report, which would add to the end of the language there, which states that the area becoming more visible due to future public roads or development, additional landscaping and buffer would be included. I would add to that on the property of the property owner as part of its overall site development strategy.
Still typing. Hold on. Get back.
On the property of the property owner as part of its overall site development strategy. Doesn't read like poetry, but
At the cost of the owner?
I don't know, I don't care who pays for it, but it's gonna be their responsibility.
Okay.
Can you read, Chairman, can you read back the back half of that sentence? So as part of, I think you changed the language.
As part of its overall site development strategy, which is the language off the letter from July 28th. As part of its overall site development strategy. And really what we're doing, I suppose, is leaving a footnote here for whenever we start seeing development north of this tract by the property owner. This is something we should probably remember to bring up again.
Under the existing circumstances, not really warranted, but depending on what comes in.
Right.
Might be.
Right.
And when it does, that property owner's gonna have to provide it.
Certainly these folks don't have any room to do it.
I doubt they would do it anyway.
Sure.
Got the only gang in town.
So with that modification, I certainly support it. Other discussion?
I agree.
Anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the site plan as submitted with the condition 1 and the discussion from the chairman.
The proposed modification to the condition.
Yeah, proposed modification.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for roll call.
Manson,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Huggins.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Moving to item 7E, discuss a text amendment allowing emergency facilities in N1 zoning district. Before you get started, why didn't we have this to begin with?
I don't know. I was actually caught off guard. We had our meeting a couple of weeks ago, Joe and I did, and I just figured this is a permitted use by right. And during our discussion, they said, well, some communities allow these by special use permit. And I said, no, we're good. And then I figured I better look. And then all of a sudden it's like, holy crap. We don't even allow it by special use permit. It's just not allowed, period. So I've already actually advertised for the public hearing, but I did want to bring it forward to you all to say this is kind of a big deal. We did finally get that location nailed down for the fire station. Plans and development is moving forward, and lo and behold, found that we had a glitch in our code that did not allow justice, public order, and safety activities in the M1 district, which is still is an oddity to me, but nonetheless, that's the way things have fallen out. So what I would just want to get some input from the Planning Commission, if you feel like it's a good idea to move forward with this. And I think it is, but as part of our process, we usually always introduce a topic before the Planning Commission before city staff moves forward with a text amendment. And all we would ask is to add a P for permitted use in the M1 category for section 922, which is for justice, public order, and safety activities. This would also come if there was ever a police substation or a sheriff's deputies location, they could also be part of this.
But it doesn't include a jail because you have a separate code for that.
There is a separate line item for a jail.
This be a police station, it could be a hospital, or how far does that public?
Well, when you dive down, you have to go to the NAICS codes, but it is typically for public safety EMS. I don't think hospital is in there, so I'd have to double check that, but I certainly can do that and make sure that if that's something you don't want to have We can actually also specifically target this to fire stations or police substations if you'd prefer to go that route instead of just an overall blanket approach to the 922 category.
I guess it's my initial thought. I mean, I understand the location, you know, where we're talking about, but then all the other M1 zoning spots in the city, I mean, that's gonna open up free reign of all the other stuff to go in those M1 zonings. You know, like across the street from Merck and, you know, down by Hutamaki and all those other places.
So it looks like this is police and fire if you're looking at those,
I just want to make sure that there's nothing else inside that.
other than jails.
Yeah, and then we do have that, obviously, right below the correctional institutions, is special use permit in the office industrial district. So while this says 922, that one specific line item you would have to do a special use permit for that type of use.
Is your thought, Dustin, that maybe we want to do it by special use permit as opposed to permitted reuse?
Well, no, I don't know if I'm thinking that. I just want to make sure that whatever's under justice, public order, safety, there's something that, you know, the other ground that's M1 in DeSoto, something else just doesn't pop up.
Appropriate use.
It is appropriate in that area. That's the only thing I'd be concerned about. I understand where it's at, where you want to put the fire station, that's perfectly fine, but I'm just thinking about stuff north of 10 that's still M1.
Well, I guess my thinking is, and while you're correct, that we've got some M1 areas that potentially then could have a police substation or another fire station itself, but those are really fairly few and far between. So it's not like and they're government sponsored and operated, so it's not like somebody's going to find a loophole and say, hey, I can make a buck off of this change that the city made in their development code to allow fire stations. So I get your point, but also on the other hand, the people that are operating, maintaining, and building these things are not, they're taxpaying entities, so, or taxing entities.
And I can't imagine how an M1 user would be affected by any of these types of facilities.
No, I mean, I guess part of the reason that you don't see them in residential areas, or actually, I mean, you do see them, but they're often by special use permits, because obviously at 2 in the morning, you can have a call and, you know, fire department is blaring out of there at top speed. But in an M1 district, I wouldn't say that there would be a particular challenge with that. And then, of course, now we've got a location for this proposed fire station that I just don't see there'd be any particular concerns in this location for just the noise and potential safety concerns of, you know, a fire engine hitting the streets at top speed and getting people out of the way. Now, certainly there's going to be workers, things like that, traffic on Lexington, but once again, it's going to be a 4-lane divided road with plenty of capacity. So I guess the question is, what I'm hearing is, do you want to maybe try to limit it to fire station or public safety as far as maybe sheriff's deputies, something like that, or just go with a more of a, because there are NAICS codes that kind of dig down into that.
I'm okay with the proposal. I mean, we've excluded the one that I think would probably be the most concerning, which would be to put some sort of correctional institution.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine any court wanting to plop down in an M1, but maybe they would. But I guess, you know, that I suppose there's concerns there, but I don't know that's any less appropriate in M1 than it would be in a commercial zone, quite frankly. I mean, I don't have any, I'm surprised we didn't have it to begin with.
Well, it certainly caught me off guard as well when we had our development meeting with the architect.
I think I'd be fine with it.
Other discussion? So you just want a discussion on this item, no action?
That's correct, yes. And we'll have a public hearing for our next meeting on the 26th of September.
Excellent segue. Next meeting is the 26th of September. The only other thing that I just, because I think we ought to talk about it at some point, is we obviously have the signs where Burger King was are somewhat unsightly. I know that we've exchanged some emails about that, and we think we can handle most of that as codes issues. But I am a little worried about the proliferation of these pole signs and the fact that when we have something happen like what happened to Burger King, you're gonna end up with a vacated sign. And I wonder if we really ought to be looking at some sort of a modification to our sign ordinance, at least to address this. That if it's vacated, and, you know, have some sort of requirement that they take it down or do something with it other than just leave it there.
Yeah, I think the egregious thing about it is it's just a glaring light, because that's something that's in the special use permit, is it's supposed to be a more of a muted type of situation, and now there's just a bulb in there that's just kind of bright. But I do know that Cameron and our because codes enforcement's under building officials, so I know that he's been working and engaged with the property owner. I don't know where any of that stands as of right now, but we are trying to get at least something up there, so it's not just a big hoop with a light bulb in it.
Who's supposed to be maintaining the grounds out there?
Well, actually, that sign is actually on Jake's property, isn't it?
No, Burger King's on.
The Burger King, no, the Burger King's not. Yeah,
Because the grass is about.
Yep.
yeah, that's another code enforcement issue that,
And we do have codes on that. I'm good with that. My concern is the proliferation of pole signs. And, you know, if we end up with a bunch of, not a bunch, but let's say we have another one go out, and we end up having a collection of blank discs in the sky, we have no way to deal with that. But if we're gonna allow these pole signs to be there, we ought to have some sort of a way to be able to take them down or force them to do something with them if they're not using them.
I would be in favor of having them removed if they're not in use.
I kind of agree. I mean, that's what we had to do with the 66 sign years ago. And it took forever to get that done. Were you here for that?
I was here for the tail end of that, yeah. Well,
I mean, that's-
Pride,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's my concern with the proliferation of pole signs more than anything else, is that when this does occur, then we're just gonna sit there thinking.
Like term, you should put into a special use permit. Each one of those are permitted by a special use permit, and those are terms you can certainly put in there. We have parameters for the consideration of special use permits for pole signs. We put a provision like this in that gets pretty serious about maintaining them, and, you know, we'll have to just be mindful of the First Amendment stuff, you know, that we can't.
I'm not regulating content.
Yeah, we
It's
can't
just if you aren't
regulate
using
content,
it,
but-
you have a responsibility to remove it.
Mhm.
And to me, that seems like that should be in our ordinance, because it
Yeah,
may
we-
not make it into the special use.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to remember that each time.
And maybe it's, you know, for a period of 6 months, if it's not used, to advertise for that property or whatever it may be. And that's where you get into content maybe, so you gotta be careful about that.
Yeah, yeah.
They definitely didn't waste any time on taking the signage down.
Yeah, am I the only one that's worried about this?
No. Every time I drive to Hearts, I look at that empty sign, it's like,
You know what I would be interested in, Brad, not that you probably need anything else to do, but it'd be nice to know what other city, I have the impression, I'm not a sign guy, but I have the impression that most cities in Johnson County have pretty much outlawed the pole sign. And, you know, it seems like a good idea to me. I mean, nobody complained when it came up and got talked about, but it seems like everybody's adapted very well with, you know, just monument signs. Brown changing signage on the buildings. If everybody wanted to consider a change like that, I think it'd be good to see what everybody else is doing.
Well, that's an excellent point. You solve the problem before it becomes one. You just don't allow it.
Now, historically, we've been down that path.
Have you?
Many, many times.
And I'm not one advocating for that,
Okay.
but I do respect your opinion on it. I just say that battle has been fought.
Well, maybe that's not what.
But I do think that if you put it up, you ought to maintain the thing, and if you vacate the premises, you ought to have some responsibility to take the darn thing down.
Well, could you at least cover it?
That's what I was thinking, at least put something up in there.
Just don't turn the lights on at night.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen places that have changed ownership and they just put a cover over it until they can change the signage.
So that'd be something temporary. I mean, if it's been there for a year, that'd be awfully long. You ought to be able to get them to take it down.
So does that special use permit, does that run with the land or with the owner?
Goes with the land, is my understanding. So
That's right.
Do we even know what's going on with the property? I mean, did
No,
they, is it?
not privy to
I
that.
vaguely remember when they came to us when they were building it, that the guy, I believe he was online and made the comment that he usually runs them for 3 to 5 years and then sells them. Because that was the same night that we all ended up down in the
Well, that was that night?
yeah.
The tornado?
Yeah, that was the night that we all ended up downtown, or downstairs.
No, I don't have any direct knowledge, of what
I was
the
just
ownership
curious.
situation
That
is.
kept
and-
pop, when they closed down, that scenario kept popping in my mind, and I was trying to remember, and I'm pretty sure it was that same night when they were in discussion, because there was a gentleman here from Texas, as well as the guy online, who came back up from the tornado and continued the meeting specifically so that he wouldn't have to come back from Texas to go through this again.
Okay.
Well, regardless of what his intentions are, what the intentions of that property, I think that if we have a general consensus that maybe we ought to look at that, I would charge you to maybe come up with some
Okay.
sort of a text amendment or something that would give us the ability to deal with these signs when vacated. I don't know what we can legally do, I suppose, so obviously Patrick's gonna have a view on that, but if you guys would give some thought to it, I'd like to see that
Okay.
come into play. Certainly before we get the next pole sign that we apparently have a hard time saying no to.
I would not be against eliminating them and going to a monument sign.
Well,
Apparently we've been down this road.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Open up that can.
If that option came up, wouldn't bother me any.
Okay, save that for another night. Let's go.
Yeah.
Any other topics, guys? Okay, and then motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any opposition? We're adjourned. Thank you.